What's up, everybody? So it's been a minute since I've been able to do a book review video, and this is part 7 of my Amanda Knox waiting to be heard book review. I finally finished the book, and everything Amanda Knox related online is linked in the description below. Her Twitter, her Instagram, her podcast, her Patreon, everything. Go give her a follow. She is a tremendous follow online, and support the author. Subscribe to her Patreon. You will not be disappointed. So let's jump in to part 7, the final part of my Amanda Knox book review. Right now we are at October and December 2009. Amanda talks about how she initially thought she had a 95% chance at winning her case, but her lawyers told her it was 50-50. Amanda talks about how multiple DNA experts stated that no credible scientific evidence has been presented associated with the kitchen knife and the murder of Meredith Kercher. There was nothing really linking that kitchen knife to the murder. Amanda talks about how her family was so confident that she was going to be found innocent, they had already purchased her a plane ticket back to Seattle. Talks about how during the closing arguments, the prosecution referred to Rudy Gaudet as Poor Rudy. Poor Rudy, the man who committed the crimes and was already in prison for committing those crimes. Amanda talks about how during the closing arguments, the prosecution also invented a second knife. During the entire trial, there was only mention of the one kitchen knife. But now, because DNA excluded that knife, the prosecution during closing arguments invented a second one. Just how absolutely crazy is that? The first knife didn't work out, so they're like, well, it's got to be a knife somewhere. It's this one. Like, so absolutely bizarre. Amanda talks about how on the day the verdict came, they came to get her just after 11 p.m. It was the first time since her arrest that she was outside that late. She states it was 4 minutes past midnight when the judges and jurors entered the courtroom. Talks about how when the judges read the verdict back, they said she was guilty. No, she could no longer stand. She was repeatedly saying no, 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 no. Could you imagine being innocent of a crime in a foreign country and then you're found guilty? I can't imagine what Amanda had to have been thinking and feeling and going through at that time. Just absolutely terrible. Amanda Knox received a 26-year sentence, and Raffale had a 25-year sentence. Then they adjourned the court. The next part goes from December 2009 to October 2010. Amanda talks about how she was put on suicide watch, and as crazy as it is, you can definitely see why. You're in a foreign country, in prison, for possibly 26 years for something you didn't do. The thoughts that must be running through, the thoughts that must have been running through her mind, I can't even comprehend what she must have been thinking. Amanda states that when she cut her hair short, they sent her to a psychiatrist because they said people that do drastic things like that are just looking for attention. She said that isn't true. She just wanted to be left alone. Amanda states that after 3 weeks of being in prison, after her conviction, the appeals court cut Rudy Gaudet's sentence in half from 30 years to 16, so almost half. But which is absolutely insane, because in my opinion, and everything I've seen and I've read and I've listened to and I watched, there's no way that Rudy Gaudet wasn't told to change his story, allegedly, and if he did so, he would receive a shorter sentence. And that's exactly what it seems like allegedly happened. He got his sentence cut in half. He was just saying what the prosecutors in Italy wanted him to say so that they could convict 2 innocent people in Amanda Knox and Raffale. Amanda talks about how when she was in prison, the prosecutor that prosecuted her case was convicted. Now, this blew my mind. Was convicted for abuse of office and sentenced to a 16-month suspended sentence for his part in a case they called the Monster of Florence. He was accused of using his authority to intimidate and manipulate people, which is exactly what he did to Amanda Knox. How many other times do you think he did this over the years just to get the verdict, to get somebody to falsely confess to a crime they didn't do, just so that he could get the outcome that he wanted? Amanda talks about how in prison she helped prisoners write letters, legal documents, grocery lists, and explained things to doctors. The prison officials would call her for an interpreter for anyone that didn't speak Italian, because she was learning both. Obviously, she already spoke English, but she was learning Italian as well and could translate for other inmates. Amanda talks about how after she was convicted, her family, her lawyers, her friends, and other prisoners, and even other prison officials tried to console her by telling her that she would surely have her sentence reduced, if not overturned, on appeal. So even prison officials knew Amanda was innocent and knew what was going on. Which basically, to me, means it happens all of the time, or at least used to happen all of the time. Amanda talks about how a friend named Madison actually moved from Seattle to Italy to be closer to Amanda. What a tremendous friend that would be. Such a wonderful thing to do. Talks about how her friend Madison researched the science on false confessions, because that's what happened in Amanda's case. Obviously, she falsely confessed, and unfortunately, that's something that happens all of the time. A lot of people in that situation, when you're up for days on end, no food, nothing to drink, can't sleep, nothing, you eventually break. It could happen to anybody. It's easy for me or you to sit here and say now, well, I wouldn't break, I would be strong, I wouldn't falsely confess. You don't know that until you're put in the position that Amanda Knox was put in. Amanda talks about how when the judge came out to announce his decision if the case could be reviewed for appeal, he stated, "I'm convinced this case is complex enough to warrant a review in the name of reasonable doubt. If it is not possible to check the identity of the DNA, we will check on the reliability of the original tests." Finally, it looks like Amanda Knox and Raffale were getting a bit of good news, because they were going to actually finally get a chance to defend themselves on appeal. Amanda talks about how the homeless guy that was called to testify the first time was called to re-testify, and this time himself he was also in prison on drug-related charges, and stated that he always used drugs, including heroin, in 2007. This was the guy that supposedly said he saw Amanda and Raffale on November 1st, and then when he re-testified, it sounds like he saw them on October 31st, not November the 1st. Amanda talks about how there was an award banquet for the police while she was in prison, and the police got awarded for how they handled the investigation into Meredith's death. 4 of the 16 police officers that received awards are mentioned in the slander case against Amanda Knox. So these police officers clearly did not do their job correctly, and now they are being awarded for arresting 2 innocent people. Just absolutely ridiculous. Amanda talks about how she was happy when she heard the news the DNA tests results came back and they were in favor of the defense. They were in favor of her and Raffale. She states it was the first time she jumped for joy while she was in prison. We move ahead to June 30th to October 2nd, 2011. Amanda talks about how they showed a video of when the evidence was being collected, and it showed dirty latex gloves that the investigators wore, and the police also had their own recording showing them passing the bra clasp back and forth and then putting it back on the floor to be photographed as evidence. That's just basic things you do not do. You don't need to be an investigator or a rocket scientist to know that you don't pick up evidence, pass it around, and then put it back. That's a very easy way to transmit DNA from one piece to the other. Wearing dirty gloves, you always change your gloves between everything that you're doing at a crime scene. I mean, and these guys got awards for how they handled this case. Just absolutely bonkers. And by the end of the video that they showed during the retrial, they showed more than 50 different mistakes the investigators and police had made. 50 mistakes, more than 50 mistakes, just crazy. DNA evidence on the bra clasp that was said to have belonged to Raffale was the only reason why he was convicted, and now this clearly throws that out. Amanda talks about how during closing arguments when they began on September 23rd in the appeal, Patrick lawyers emphasized that she was a sorceress of deceit. They had a lot of crazy names for Amanda during this whole crazy fiasco. October 3rd, 2011 was verdict day during the appeals case. At this point, Amanda spent 34,248 hours in prison since November 6, 2007. And she was only able to see her family for 376 of those hours. I can't imagine. And then the time finally came. The judge read the verdict. She writes it out in Italian and then English. The judge states the defendants are acquitted by the court for not having committed the acts. Finally, Amanda and Raffale have been found innocent and set freed. Amanda went back home to Seattle. Raffale stayed in Italy. Now, they would be found guilty again and then found innocent a time after that. So the trial didn't end on October 3rd, 2011. They were actually found guilty while Amanda was back in the States. They re-looked at the case and found them guilty again, and then they were found innocent, and that was the end. There were no more appeals, there were no more convictions, nothing. Amanda and Raffale were innocent. Raffale still lived in Italy, so if they were found guilty, he would have been sent back to prison on that day. Italy would have had to have asked the United States to extradite her back to Italy. Now, I personally don't think that would have happened just because of the situations in the case, but you never know. And even if that they didn't extradite her, she would never have been able to leave America, never to go on vacation to any other country ever with her family. But thankfully, luckily, it worked out for Amanda Knox and her family and Raffale. Well, that's Amanda Knox's book, Waiting to be Heard. Pick it up on Amazon bookstores. It's an excellent read. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. I'm going to do some more book reviews. I got them all behind me here. I'm actually doing Wrecking Crew as well. It's been a minute since I did one of those videos, but again, thank you so much. Follow Amanda Knox. It's in the description. Hope you have a great day. I'll see you again soon.